Hello, everyone. My name is Sato, from a member of Hiroshima, interpreter for peace. I'll introduce you some monument, the Cenotaph, the Pond of Peace, and the Frame of Peace. First written in front of the Cenotaph, I'll tell you about on outline. On August 6th, every year, Hiroshima City holds its Peace Memorial Ceremony here in front of the Cenotaph. The number of participants was regulated this year to prevent infection from the coronavirus this year. In past years, tens of thousands of Japanese and foreign visitors would attend this ceremony, including airborne survivors. We hope with the world leaders will come to Hiroshima, and we want them to promise the abolition of nuclear weapons. On November 27, 2019, Pope Francisco came to Hiroshima and message to the world. He said, using atomic energy for war is nothing other than crime. In addition, on May 27, 2016, US President Barack Obama stood here and gave a speech entitled Toward a Moral Awakening. In it, he said, on a bright, cloudless morning, death fell from the sky and the world was changed. A flash of light and made a wall of fire destroyed our city and demonstrated that mankind possessed the means to destroy itself. Who do we come to praise to Hiroshima? We come to ponder a terrible force unleashed in the not-so-distant past. We come to mourn the dead, including over 100,000 Japanese men, women, and children, thousands of Koreans, dozens of Americans held prisoners. They speak to us. They ask us to look inward, to take a stock of who we are and what we might become. Let's take a look at the Cenotaph. Please come here. This is a memorial monument for Hiroshima, City of Peace, commonly known as the Cenotaph. The word Cenotaph means a burial monument to honor someone whose body lies elsewhere. Its design resembles an ancient Japanese house. It's designed in the hope that it will shelter the souls who rest here. This photo shows a haniwa, model of an ancient Japanese house. During the Allied occupation, the US enforced a press code which prohibited people in Japan from building war memorials of any kind. It also forbade them from talking about the A-bomb or its effect in the media. As a result, it was not until 1952, the year the occupation was ended, that the city of Hiroshima was able to erect this monument. On September 8, 1951, Japan and the Allied powers signed the San Francisco Treaty. The war had ended with millions dead. On August 6th of that year, during the peace memorial ceremony, children orphaned by the A-bomb unveiled the cenotaph. The stone chest contained a register of those who died from the A-bomb. As of August 6, 2020, it reached nearly 330,000 names, including Koreans, Chinese, and Americans of all. Every year, the city adds new names to the register, which today span 119 volumes, including one blank book bearing only the words "many people whose names are unknown." The inscription on the stone chest reads, "Let all souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil." We hope people everywhere will embrace the spirit of these words. This pledge expresses the true spirit of Hiroshima. We urge all the people to pray for repose of the souls of these A-bomb victims and never again to repeat the crime against humanity called war. Overcoming the sadness and hatred of the past, this pledge expresses our strong faith in the hope of coexistence and peace. Next is I'd like to draw your attention to the Pond of Peace. Many A-bomb victims suffered terrible burns from the summer days and died crying out for water. This pond is dedicated to all the souls of these A-bomb victims in the hope that it will provide them with all the water they will ever need. I'll now share two poems written by A-bomb poet Tamiki Hara entitled "Give Me Water," and this is a human being. Give me water. Give me water. Give me water. Oh, give me water to drink. Let me have some. I want rather to die, to die. Oh, help me. Oh, help me. Water. I bid you water. I beg you, want anyone? Oh, 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 the heaven split, the streets are gone, the river flowing on. Oh, 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 night coming on. To these eyes parched and sear, to these lips inflamed. Oh, the morning of a man reading, whose face in the scorched, smarting, the ruined face of a man. This is a human being. This is a human being. Look how the atom bomb changed it. Flesh swells fearfully. All men and women take one shape to voice that trickles from swollen lips on the festering, charred black face whispers the same words. Please help me. This is a human being. This is the face of a human being. Last, I'd like to draw your attention to the frame of peace. First written in 1964, the frame of peace symbolizes our hope for a nuclear-free world. It is not an eternal flame on the day when the last nuclear weapon is dismantled. This flame will be extinguished. You know about 14,000 nuclear weapons died in the hands of just 9 countries, and many nations, including Japan, believe they are protected under the nuclear umbrella of these countries. So for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons has been signed and ratified by 40 countries, with just 10 countries more ratification. The treaty will enter into effect as international law, as a pledge from the people of Hiroshima. The flame of peace has been carried throughout the world. Thank you.
Introduce me.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Peter Cordes and I will be continuing our broadcast from here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the monument dedicated to Sadako Sasaki, as well as the A-bomb dome. And there's actually a surprising connection between the two that a lot of people even here in Hiroshima don't know about, and I'll tell you about that too. So come with me. So one thing that I'll tell you about as we walk toward the monument is, if you look around Hiroshima, there's so many trees here, right? So that's kind of curious. I mean, clearly the A-bomb was very hot. Temperatures at ground zero were between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees Celsius at the moment of the bombing, more than twice the heat required to melt steel. The vast majority of the trees did not survive either. So where did all these trees come from? When they started rebuilding the city, there was a rumor that actually some of the scientists who worked on the bomb believed that nothing would grow in Hiroshima for 75 years, right? So I mean, if that were true, that means like headlines right now would be saying like, things finally grow in Hiroshima, right? It's really amazing to think, but people didn't know that. And as they rebuilt the city, the people asked other prefectures, they said, if you want to help Hiroshima, please send trees, right? Send trees. And over the course of 2 years, some 6,000 trees arrived from literally every prefecture in Japan. So, in a way, to visit Hiroshima is to visit all of Japan, because we have trees from literally every corner of the nation. So with that said, this is a monument dedicated to the children who died in the A bombing. And as we get a little closer, I'll tell you about it. Let's try not to get run over. So, in Japanese, this is called the Genbaku no Konozo. In English, it's the Children's Peace Monument. Now, some of you may be familiar with Sadako Sasaki, the story of Sadako and the 1,000 paper cranes. But I'm going to be sharing a version of the story with you that is, it's based on what Tomiko Kawano, Sadako's best friend, told me. So this is not an official retelling. I'm retelling it as I remember her telling it to me. But this is essentially the story. So Sadako Sasaki, at the top of this monument, you can see a little girl holding a paper crane. So that is Sadako. And she was 2 at the time of the bombing. And as her mother fled the wreckage of the burning city, black rain fell on her. Even so, she grew up as a healthy little girl. She was very popular in school and very active, and she excelled at any kind of sport. In fact, if there was any kind of competition, if Sadako joined, everybody would just give up because they knew there was no chance. She would best everyone, even the boys. 10 years after the bombing, there was there was school sports day, and there was a competition between different schools, and Sadako's class won a great victory with Sadako running as the anchor on their relay race team. So pretty amazing stuff, right? This huge victory for her. But shortly after that, that same year, she started to feel short of breath. She started having trouble keeping up. And she was admitted to Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital with acute leukemia. Now, in those days, there wasn't really a lot that could be done for leukemia patients. But the doctors and nurses and her parents, the adults in her life, they tried to downplay the seriousness of her illness. Meanwhile, her school year finished up, and her friends, including Tomiko Kawano, they formed a club called the Unity Club. Now, the Unity Club had 3 promises that they made to each other. The first was that they would continue to meet every month in order to stay in touch. Arigatou gozaimasu. They would also gather anytime there was any kind of special event, like a wedding or something like that, right? So they made that promise, and their final promise was that they would continue to meet Sadako in the hospital. And that's what they did. Every weekend, they would take turns going and meeting Sadako, or Sada-chan, as they called her. Now, in the hospital, Sadako, she learned that if a leukemia patient's white blood cell count climbs over 100,000 parts per cubic centimeter, they don't recover. So she started secretly recording her blood chart information on a scrap of paper, which she hid under her hospital bed so as not to worry the adults. On the day that her white blood cell count climbed over 100,000, she stopped recording that information and she started folding paper cranes. In Japan, there's a legend that says that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your wish will come true. Her wish was to become well. She continued folding paper cranes out of any paper that she could find, even her medicine wrappers. Some of them were so tiny she had to use pins to fold them. Some of them are on display in the Peace Memorial Museum today. After she reached 1,000, she continued folding to keep her spirits up. But she died peacefully in her sleep about 8 months after the onset of leukemia. Her friends in the Unity Club gathered at her home, and at her wake, with her ashes, or cremated ashes, in front of them, they swore an oath that they would build a monument in her honor. They were just kids. They didn't really know how to do that. They knew that it would take a pile of money, but fortunately their teacher got them in touch with local peace activists, and he said, well, let's raise the money together. And that's what they did. They started standing in the park, in the streets, gathering donations. And it might not seem like kids could just by themselves could necessarily do that much, right? And keep in mind, too, that they only accepted donations from other school children who gave their lunch money or their allowance money. That might not sound like it would add up to much. But first, donations came in from the city, from the prefecture, then from the nation, and they started coming in from overseas as well. At the end of 1 year, they had raised in modern money $500,000 USD. 3 years later, this monument, the Children's Peace Monument, was unveiled on May 5th, which is Children's Day, a national holiday here in Japan. Standing in the audience were members of the Unity Club. Trying to keep it together here, guys. So, as a result of their actions, a children's peace movement started, similar to what we're seeing with Fridays for Future right now. And this movement swept through Japan, and it continued strong for decades and inspired people all around the world. The paper crane was elevated to a symbol of peace that's now recognized internationally. In fact, here in the Peace Park today, there are people going around folding paper cranes or handing paper cranes to people. People also send garlands of 1,000 paper cranes, which is called a sembasuru, to Hiroshima each year. And each year we receive 10 metric tons of paper cranes in Peace Memorial Park. That is more than the weight of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atom bombs combined. Members of the Unity Club still meet to this day. So let's take a close look at some of these paper cranes that we have up here. Also, the inscription underneath the monument, it says, "This is our cry, this is our prayer for building peace in the world." Tomiko Kawano has a group called Peace Minds Hiroshima, and they actually make notebooks for school children out of recycled paper cranes. Arigatou gozaimasu. So this is an example of that, and inside it you can see, open it up for you, just crack that guy open, there it is. They have information about the bombing, about Sadako and this monument, and it's made out of recycled paper cranes. And they send these around the world completely free to school children and children's groups. And if you work with children, or you know somebody who does, and you are interested in working with these or getting them in touch, the group is called Peace Minds Hiroshima, and their website is pm-hiroshima.com. Thank you so much. So let's go take a look at the A-bomb dome, and I will tell you about that surprising connection between Sadako Sasaki and the A-bomb dome. And so these booths here that you're seeing, these are all filled with paper cranes. This one actually is one of my favorites that's on display right now, if you come this way. So somebody made a watercolor painting on a canvas made from folded paper cranes, which just blows my mind. This, of course, is the Children's Peace Monument. This is the A-bomb dome, which I'm about to tell you about. And this says Heiwa no Chikai, so that's a prayer for peace or a wish for peace. And this is Reiwa, that's the current era that we are now in because we have a new emperor. Reiwa will be the era of disarmament. So let's take a look. Go this way, is that okay? And I will tell you about the A-bomb dome. So what's the connection between Sadako Sasaki and the A-bomb dome? So I'll tell you a little bit about the dome's history, but just in brief, that connection, essentially it's like this. Sadako Sasaki in 1955 falls ill with leukemia and dies. Her friends in the Unity Club, they start organizing, fundraising, and a children's peace movement is born, right? The monument we just saw was built in 1958. The A-bomb dome was preserved in 1966, right? So 11 years later, and I will tell you a little bit about its history, and you'll see how it's connected with Sadako. So to start off with the A-bomb dome, it was built in 1915, designed by a Czech architect named Jan Letzel. So this was actually a really amazing building at the time. It's kind of what you would call the Taisho Roman style. I mean, the original was, meaning that it mixed Taisho era, like kind of Japanese feeling with Western 1920s kind of, 19-teens kind of architecture. So the A-bomb dome, maybe we have a photo of it over this way, so let's go take a look. Built in 1915, and it originally was an exhibition hall for local products. So things throughout the prefecture, and you could come and see them. It also had art, theater, music. It was a beautiful, thriving community center at the heart of Hiroshima. But as the war raged on, it eventually was converted into administrative offices by the wartime government in 1944. Then, of course, in 1945, it was destroyed in the first atomic bombing ever wrought on humankind. The reason why it remains standing is because it's kind of counterintuitively, because it's directly underneath the blast, almost directly under the blast. And for that reason, the force pushed down on the building, shoving it at the ground rather than knocking it over. It's also, there's been a lot of speculation of other things why exactly it survived. Recent computer models have shown that the abundance of windows probably allowed a lot of the blast force to pass through the structure, which would have helped. And also some other research has suggested that the shape of the dome would have actually created a kind of blast cocoon as the blast force bounced back off of it, and thus would have dampened some of the blast force that hit the building. In any case, afterward, all of downtown Hiroshima was essentially ruins, right? And this skeletal structure was one of the few things that remained. People even would orient themselves on their relationship to what became known as the A-bomb dome. It naturally earned that title. Before that, it was called the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, a name that, as you can see, doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. So, the A-bomb dome, here you can see it in its former glory, as designed by Jan Letzel. The dome on the top was copper. It actually would have melted and vaporized instantly because it was so close to the bombing. And of course, anybody around here would have suffered a similar fate if they were directly exposed. So this was one of the few structures that remained, and people would even scrawl messages for missing loved ones on the side of the A-bomb dome in hopes of reconnecting. And of course, many people were going through the ruins searching for water, searching for family, searching for missing loved ones, clawing through the dirt to see if they could find, their possessions, anything that had survived. Or if people were missing, they were going to makeshift aid stations and asking if they had seen somebody with such and such a name tag. Because at that time, due to the fire bombings that were widespread during the war, people had their names sewn in their clothing. But there were actually 70,000 unidentified A-bomb victims because so many people were burned beyond recognition. So many people wandered searching, but never really found answers, right? So there were messages like that on the walls of this building, trying to connect with people. Now, after the war, as they started rebuilding the city, Hiroshima, one of the things that they focused on immediately is they wanted to build a city of peace, and that is actually the moniker of the city today, right? Hiroshima, City of Peace. And even with that idea in mind, there was a debate about what to do with this, right? This huge atomic ruin. Like, what do we do with it? So some people wanted it preserved as a reminder of that painful day, as a symbol of peace. But other people wanted it torn down. Many of them even were survivors who just found it personally painful to look at these ruins. So, in 1959, a young A-bomb survivor, she had been, I believe, 1 year old at the time of the bombing. Her name was Hiroko Kajiyama. She wrote in her diary, "I just wonder if that painful reminder, the A-bomb dome, will always be there to tell the world how fearsome atomic bombs are." She died the following year of leukemia, just like Sadako. There was already a children's peace movement, as I mentioned, that was strong at this time. So they gathered at the Children's Peace Monument where we just were, and they read passages from her diary. In the following month, they began fundraising to save the dome. At that time, the mayor of Hiroshima, who was an amazing advocate for peace, he was Shinzo Hamai, incredible person. He actually was against preserving the dome originally because as a statesman, he knew that the city couldn't really afford to preserve these ruins and kind of make them structurally sound. And as an A-bomb survivor, he also found it painful to look at them. But when he read letters from these young activists and he saw them standing in the streets and standing in the park fundraising, he changed his mind. And even though he was the mayor of a city, he went to Tokyo and he stood in the park in Tokyo and he also fundraised to save the dome. The publicity from that caused donations to start coming in from all over Japan. And in 1966, Hiroshima City Council voted unanimously to preserve the A-bomb dome for all time. In 1996, it was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. And there were only 2 World War II sites that graced that register. One is the A-bomb dome, and the other is Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. So the final thing I'll tell you about this, to kind of recap that, we're seeing similar things, what happened with Sadako and Hiroko Kajiyama around the world with justice movements today, right? We started seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement. People were upset because many people were dying as a result of injustice, just like these children were who were part of an atomic bombing. And that might seem like very different things, but it's the same kind of violence. It's state violence, and it's a callousness for human life and for civilian life. And as a result of this, people started organizing, and when another person died, they said, no, this is enough, and they took action. And what we're seeing around the world is exactly like that. All these movements are connected, and I hope that you can plug into justice movements and to peace movements wherever you are. And as soon as you get the chance, please come to Hiroshima and take a look at this beautiful city of peace. And if possible, contact us, Hiroshima Interpreters for Peace. We would love to take you on a tour. So if you haven't yet, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we will be seeing you at our next video, which is at 11 Japan Standard Time. Thank you so much, and take care.